Welcome to the latest episode of the Union Federation here on the Fandom Podcast Network. Of course, this is the show that brings you everything going on in Star Trek and the Orville here on the Fandom Podcast Network. With the show, we take an in-depth look at both of these franchises and discover that both of them can coexist in today's fandom as they introduce us to fresh, new, and exciting stories, characters, galactic destinations, and a lot of scavenging, too, I must say. A lot of spare parts for this week's episode. Now, the crew... I still got an amazing crew here. We're a little short-handed. Kevin put in for some special space dock leave. I think we can allow for it. And my other two crewmates actually have pulled themselves from the galley where they were cooking turkeys, getting ready for the upcoming festivities to join me here. Plus, I told Hayley she could punch the weapons button a whole bunch today. So without further ado, of course, the talented Hayley Stoddard is joining us once again for the special Thanksgiving week episode of Union Federation.
Yes, and I'm very excited, and I love when I get to push the weapons buttons. Mm-hmm. It's so much fun.
Yeah, and don't worry, we will have Science-y Hayley at some point in this podcast. It's in her contract. So, but also too, do you have turkey, or is it just a bunch of Romulan ale, Amy Nelson?
I was looking, and I do need to run and grab some more.
Yeah, McCoy left you with the special hookup, didn't he?
Yes, I've got the discount.
Well, we are here to talk Star Trek Discovery as we're already in episode 6 of season 3. Time is flying.
Yeah, it is, definitely. For sure.
Before we get started, I have one question I want to ask you too, as far as Discovery's release schedule, because they aren't taking any kind of holiday break. We're going straight through the holidays. Are you liking that, or are you kind of wishing they would take a little holiday break here? Because I know one of our new episodes actually comes out Christmas Eve.
I think it's fantastic just because it's 2020 and we kind of all need like a breather because so many people... You should not travel to see your family. Please don't do that. And so if you can't, what else are you going to have to do and going on? And so I think it's a fantastic idea that they're not going to take a breather.
What do you think, Amy?
Yeah, I think with COVID and exactly as Hayley was saying, it is actually nice having these episodes come one right after the other. I was thinking about it, how we had that wonderful break in season 1, and I really did enjoy it. But then they didn't have it for season 2. And so I was wondering, did they plan to just originally go through, or did they plan to have a break, but then COVID might have changed their mind? It'd be interesting to know.
I think they probably planned to have a break, but because of the delays with COVID causing so much delays in effects and production and after everything, I think they kind of realized they were in a time crunch and wanted to push through going through it. So I think it's good because a lot of people are going to have some extra time during the holidays, whether we like it or not. Hopefully we don't have another nationwide lockdown, but we don't know. But I do think it's a good thing. I'm also excited that there's several other big streaming announcements that have happened. I'm really excited. Wonder Woman 84 is coming out Christmas Day on HBO Max. I am loving that. One of my favorite other sci-fi shows, The Expanse, starts streaming on December 16th. So I am really excited about that. Hayley, you got something you're excited about?
If you haven't watched it, Netflix just picked up Stargate Sg1.
Yes, I did. I actually
the other Star Trek show.
I actually own all the series of that. Thank you, iTunes. I think it was a sale $75, and I got everything Stargate ever made. So...
Nice.
So I'm in the middle of watching Stargate Atlantis because I already finished SG1. I had Hulu and it was there. So I am all about the SG1. It's such a fun and just enjoyable show.
And don't let her...
I was
just going to say, don't let Amy Nelson fool you. She's so busy watching Jason Momoa in Stargate Atlantis.
Yeah, he's not too shabby.
Yeah. I like to call SG1 the Daniel, don't touch it. Daniel, leave it alone. Daniel, don't bring it back TV show. Yeah.
I also call SG1, this is where all the Farscape people went when Farscape was done.
I'm in love with Amanda Tapping. I think she is brilliant. Mm-hmm. I like her the best. Like, I'm just so impressed with her. So I'd like to meet her sometime.
So, side note on that, if you're an Amanda Tapping fan, check out the show Sanctuary.
Oh, I'm going to write that down.
Lasted 4 seasons on the Sci-Fi Channel, but she was the creator and producer of that show, and a lot of the Stargate alum make an appearance on that. So, but getting back on topic here, we are here to talk Star Trek Discovery Season 3, Episode 6, Scavengers. But before we do that, I'm going to open up some hailing frequencies and tell you where you can find the Union Federation and everything else that comes out on the Fandom Podcast Network. And actually, it starts with our new YouTube channel, where you can find not only all the great audio podcasts of the Fandom Podcast Network, but special live events too, such as our newest project, the Fandom Show, where once a month we get together with some of the faces of the Fandom Podcast Network, have an open roundtable discussion about the things that have happened in fandom in the last month. The most recent episode, we had special guest and author Jonathan Melville on. He's just recently written a book, Kind of Magic, the Making of the Original Highlander. You can find that on Amazon. Outstanding book, great guy. We covered a lot of things along with Kevin, myself, and our friend over that is the host of Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast, Dan Hadley. So many good things there. And of course, too, it all begins, if you want to call it the OG of the Fandom Podcast Network, our fpnet.podbean.com, where you can find the master feed for all of our audio podcasts. Also, you can download the Podbean app and search for Fandom Podcast Network. And you can pretty much find us on all major podcasters now. We are on Apple, iTunes. We're on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Pandora, a whole bunch of others out there. You know, you got to kill some time while you're waiting in line in Black Friday, so you might as well listen to some Fandom Podcast Network. Too, if you want to contact us directly, you can email us here at the Union Federation at theunionfederation@gmail.com. You can find me, Kyle, on Twitter at @KyleW or on Instagram at @KyleFandom. Kevin, of course, you can always find at Spartan_Phoenix on both Twitter and Instagram. Hayley, where can we find you on social media and other signals you have been putting out there lately?
So you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Trekkie01D. Also over on the Trek FM network, where I host Standard Orbit and talking about the original series. And soon, hopefully, fingers crossed, over on the Trek Geeks network, where I'm going to have a science podcast.
By the way, congratulations on your first edited episode.
Good
job. So, and Amy, you're still by the end of 2021 going to be just controlling the podcast internet. I know you are. So, not only where can people find you on social media, I know you've got a lot of signals out there.
Yeah, I'm over at United Federation of Podcasts, and I host All Good Things, which is about all of the Star Trek. So that pushes me to watch more than Next Gen, because I do a Next Gen podcast called Galaxy Class. So you can find me on those two. I am also on Twitter at Miss Amy Nelson.
I also want to do a quick shout out to our good friend Brandon Shea Mutala, because he also does here on the Fandom Podcast Network, Good Evening, an Alfred Hitchcock podcast. And his next episode of that will be his 50th episode of that podcast.
Ooh.
So they got some special stuff planned. I just want to give a quick shout out to Brandon. He's obviously a huge Star Trek fan and very well known within the podcast community for Star Trek as well. So, also too, the holidays are coming up, which means it's time for some new gear. Visit the TeePublic and visit the Fandom Podcast Network store. Search for Fandom Podcast Network or the title of any of your favorite shows here on the network. You will find the gear, whether it's t-shirts, hoodies, pillows. We don't have any phasers yet. We're still working on that. Sorry. Tricorders. We're having a battery issue. I'm leaving Kevin up to that. But you know what? Anything, find your gear. Everything that we do on that, it just goes right back into the network so we can make you better podcasts. TeePublic, lots of sales coming up, including a huge Black Friday sale. So check that out. And finally, we love reviews, especially on iTunes. We love those 5-star reviews, of course, but we love the feedback in general because, as always, we're trying to make better podcasts to feed your ears around here. But you know what, guys? Without further ado, it's time to talk a little Star Trek Discovery. So let's head on in to the Officers' Lounge. So, as we talked about earlier, it's episode 6 already, which just blows my mind. This is flying by. The title of this episode is Scavengers. So, let's dive right in. Hayley, would you be so kind to read the opening act for us?
Of course. The episode opens with a meeting at Starfleet headquarters where Saru updates Vance and other captains on the upgrades made to Discovery, including programmable matter. Vance welcomes Discovery back to the fleet and assigns several other matters to other captains at the briefing. Captain Teles Kardashev is assigned to deliver extra shields to Ryling 7 to protect against solar flares. Captain Rama will deliver replicator technology to Kaiser 7. I
think it's
12.
Yes, I was going to.
Kaiser 12, which has a severe food shortage. Captain Bandra of the USS Lagin is assigned to the 2-month-long supply run to Naseth. Saru notes that Discovery could carry out these missions more quickly, but Vance says that he needs the ship to remain at headquarters as a rapid responder, revealing to the other captains that the still classified existence of the spore drive. Vance also reports that the planet Argeth is on yellow alert due to a potential impending threat from the Emerald Chain in the forthcoming 12 hours. Osira and the Chain have been pushing hard lately, Vance says, but their objective on Argeth remains unclear. Vance wants Discovery ready to jump in if needed. On Discovery, the bridge crew puts on their new comm badges, which Lieutenant Audrey Willa explains are also holopads, tricorders, and personal transporters. Tilly and the crew explore their new systems when suddenly Linus beams into the captain's chair, having intended to beam himself to the mess hall, becoming a running gag. R.A. Bryce reports a hail from a vessel outside the Federation's distortion field. Nilsson orders him to answer, and the crew is surprised to find Grudge alone aboard Cleveland Booker's vessel. After pulling the ship in, Saru and Michael Burnham listen to a holographic recording left by Book. He explains that he had been traveling to the Bajoran Exchange when he learned about the existence of a black box like the ones Burnham had sought in her investigation into the burn. The box is on Hunhao, a planet controlled by the Emerald Chain. Booker said he planned to investigate and would program his ship to deliver Grudge to Discovery if he did not return within 24 hours. Ending the recording, Book says he will find Burnham and Grudge. Burnham, ready to go save Book, is ordered not to by Saru, as the Discovery is on emergency standby. Later in a corridor, Burnham tells Philippa Georgiou that she cannot stand by and is planning an unsanctioned mission to find Book and the black box. Georgiou notes that such an action would reflect poorly on Saru, who was trying to prove his legitimacy to Starfleet Command. "I'd rather regret something I did than something I didn't," Burnham responds. Georgiou says Burnham had hooked her when she said unsanctioned mission.
Now, there's a lot to them. They impact a lot in this opening segment of this episode between... And I want to start with the meeting with the captains because I found this just so fascinating, guys. We're seeing all these captains. We're starting to get a feel for Starfleet. But you just feel like Vance is pulling way... I don't know about you guys. I felt like Vance is pulling way too many strings and keeping people in the dark on certain things. The communication might not be the best in this current version of Starfleet, Amy.
You know, I might have to disagree with you because I feel like just because we're only seeing a few of the captains, I feel like that's sort of all there are. So he's having this meeting. He's still, I think, holding close, obviously, the spore drive. But everyone is knowing the situations and, okay, you need to, protect against the solar flares. You need to help with the shortage and going on there. And, can we do this? And so I feel like he's entrusting his captains. They're having a Starfleet meeting. He's obviously the one giving out the orders. And I like to see this organization. It almost makes me feel at home. Okay, this is something familiar that in my mind, this is what's happening at Starfleet. And the scenes with them repairing the ship were amazing. I loved seeing it. And Discovery USS 1031-A, just saying.
Yeah, it is definitely the retrofitted Discovery. Was I reading this wrong, Hayley? It just felt like because maybe the shock of the captains that all of a sudden we have this rapid response vessel.
Well, it makes sense, though, because as we learned in the last episode, they've been on triage and, they can't go very far and they can't go very fast. And so it's nice that they can have something that will allow them to get somewhere super quick without drawing attention because of warp drive. So I think that's really quite an interesting choice of words. And I like that Vance is saying, okay, you are going to be here. I think that's appropriate because the crew is still trying to adjust to being in this new time. And they need to adjust to what Starfleet and the Federation are at this point and kind of learn where they are at. And I think that'll give Discovery crew enough time to do that, as well as, hey, you guys are the ones, if we have something that is super urgent, you're going to be the ones to go, and everybody else is going to be on these missions. It's going to take a little bit longer to get there.
Yeah. Now,
and I liked his, Vance was like, I could use 10 of you right now.
Yeah, that was a good line.
Yeah.
The other thing I liked was Discovery kind of discovering their upgrades. Now, I thought it was very cool how they were reacting to the programmable matter on the bridge. I found it very interesting. I don't know if you guys caught this or not. Detmer almost being scared of the programmable matter. Like, no. Do you think is there more to that, or is that still Detmer just being kind of in panic mode from what's been happening? Because they were trying to hint that she was kind of on the road to recovery. It just felt like, I was kind of thinking because of her bionics itself, maybe that was why she had a problem with programmable matter. I don't know, but I was wondering if you guys had picked up on that. Hayley, start with.
I didn't, but I can understand her trepidation. She's very much used to the control panel that she's had, and we get used to things that we have, and we don't like change. So going in and saying, okay, now there's this programmable matter. Oh, okay. That can be very jarring on top of what she's trying to kind of recover from in being afraid of being at the helm and steering this ship. Yeah. So.
And Amy, too, we have the Swiss Army knife of Delta comm badges now.
Yes. So I did want to talk about what you were saying with Detmer, and I think that's a great pickup because if you remember, Discovery just came from AI being really bad. Yeah. And so with this programmable matter, and especially when she's like, well, it reacts to you and it learns from you and it learns how you move. And so that's, pretty close to what we saw with Control. So there might be some hesitation from Detmer. So I think that's a good pickup. I'm going to watch that and see how that goes. I'm not sure if you saw the Ready Room, but talking about the comm badges, amazing to hear what they all can do. And the guy who created them, the set prop guy, actually was able to control and put in his input on how should the hand motions be. So he was saying, like, if you put your hand out like this and raise it up, then that's your iPad or whatever. Or and he was explaining the hand motions. So what you see them doing, it was created by him. I just thought it was so cool. And he calls them the TRICOM badge. So it's your tricorder, your communications, and a transporter. So now we have a new name for these badges.
I would mess up those hand movements so much. I know it would be disastrous.
Yeah, you would be Linus bouncing all around like the country. Bing here, bing here, bing here.
But see, like that, I get the double tap because he explains he explained it where if you tap it once, it brings up and you can program where you want to go, and then you tap it again and it goes. The double tap is like, I don't know. Anyway, but it's like I swipe up this way and then I have to swipe back. Like, I would screw things up so bad.
Now, I have a very important question for you ladies. Isn't it time we just all admit that Grudge is actually the star of season 3 of Star Trek Discovery?
Yes! How cute was that the view screen and there's this huge cat. Oh my gosh. I laughed and it warmed my heart. I'm like, Grudge!
Grudge purrs like Starry does. Like late at night. Curled up on the bed.
Yeah, I have a couple kids who do that too. What's funny is I actually have a cousin who has a Maine Coon, and I think it might be bigger than Grudge. It was great. Anytime we get Book at this point, because I think Book is quickly becoming my favorite character on Discovery. So knowing that we were going to have Book, I love how they set it up with Grudge here. But you know what? I think the most fun moment might have been when Burnham is plotting to go on a rescue mission, and her little conversation with Giorgio, because we're still not, she's still bringing up things with Giorgio that happened last episode where she kind of finds her in like this trance state. But I love the line of, "You had me when you said unsanctioned mission." I mean, Michelle Yeoh is so much fun, guys.
She is. And their interplay, Burnham and Giorgio, is classic. I love it. I feel like it's really developing. And I almost feel it's like the actors really enjoy playing off each other as well. And that's coming through. I don't know if it was in this opening act or the one where she's like, "I'm just going to strangle you." Or do you remember that part where I don't know if it was here or another one, but I just, the interplay between the two, I'm really enjoying.
Yeah. Hayley, one of the things that I find interesting with this interplay between the two of them too, and it's what's going on with Burnham right now, because Michael Burnham in episode 1 or episode 2 or season 1 or season 2 wouldn't have been breaking. She would have been doing her own thing, but I don't think she would have been breaking protocol like she has so far. And I think this is one of the plot threads that's been running since episode 1, but it's becoming more and more obvious. Burnham is like, no, I'm doing she's gotten used to being able to do her own thing.
Well, I think there's degree of that, but I almost wonder, did she ever really feel that she felt and belonged in Starfleet? Because she tends to follow the smaller orders that, if you didn't follow would kind of be insignificant and wouldn't be a big deal. But then the orders that are a bigger impact, she's like, nah, I'm going to ignore that. And this is not the first time. I mean, she's done it once a season so far. She's been like, nope, I'm doing my own thing. I'm going to do what I want. Repercussions, come what they may. And it's really jarring because that's not what a Starfleet officer does. That's what a bad admiral does. That's what someone who like Eddington from Deep Space Nine, that kind of thing. It's just like, okay, really, do we have to have her being like, nope, I'm going to do this thing, even though I was told I'm not supposed to do this thing, even though I know it's going to look really bad for my captain, I'm going to do it anyway. Really just doesn't indicate a good Starfleet officer, which also shows why she didn't want the captaincy, because she, we knew in episode 2 and episode 3 specifically that she really was questioning whether she wanted to be a part of Starfleet. And I still think she doesn't. I think she's done. I think this year on her own has really kind of shown her that she would rather not have to report to people and follow orders and just be able to do something because she feels that she should and that it's the right thing to do, or not do something because she thinks it's not the right thing to do, kind of thing like that. So for me, I get why she's doing this and why she went to find Book and all that stuff. But at the other hand, it's like, really, again, we have to have her causing like a big problem again.
Yes,
why?
She is a bit of a troublemaker. But Amy, you were talking about conversations between Burnham and Giorgio. I'm going to lead that too. Will you care to read Act 1 for us?
Yes. Burnham and Giorgio take Book's ship to Hanhao, a sparsely populated M-class planet used for ship salvage. Giorgio asks why Burnham fell in love with Book. Burnham is surprised by the question, but Giorgio says that given how Burnham's relationship with Ash Tyler turned out, she understands why Burnham has resisted her feelings for Book, and notes that Burnham is familiar with Book's vessel. Burnham protests that she had her own ship and didn't love here or anything, having intended to say live here. Giorgio latches onto the slip, but Burnham protests and said Giorgio's stunted emotional range does not qualify her to judge Burnham. Giorgio suddenly has visions from the Terran universe of herself over a bloody body, saying the name San despondently. Burnham notices Giorgio and is frozen again, as she had in the corridor following the mission to the USS Tikhov, but Giorgio dismisses her concern. Just then, they arrive at Hanhao. Burnham explains that ship graveyards, such as this one in orbit of Hunhao, surrounded many planets. The populated area is heavily shielded, obscuring life signs. They are held by an Orion Tolar, who asks why they have come. Georgiou responds sourly that they have come to purchase salvage and pressures him into authorizing their landing by telling him she has dilithium to barter. Burnham explains that she has reverse-engineered book tracking system that tracks Grudge Cat Collar to seek out his receiver. On discovery, Tilly is surprised to find Grudge in the quarters she shares with Burnham and finds out Burnham has left the ship in Book's ship. Burnham and Georgiou land on Hunhao, where salvage ships and platforms float in the air. Tolar confiscates their weapons and says they will not receive their merchandise until they hand over the dilithium. He explains that Osira, the facility's owner, is his aunt and that the workers owe Osira and are effectively slaves. Inside the facility, the Andorian named Rin implants a device into the back of workers' necks. He apologizes, but the worker calls him a traitor and leaves. Nearby, Book works with an injured Bajoran named Lai, who also dismisses Rin. Book tells him the workers know Osira would kill him real slow if he does not cooperate. Book then spots Burnham and Georgiou. And that look was awesome.
Yeah, that look was awesome. But I'm sorry. Michelle Yeoh's like, you're paying me to have this much fun playing this character? Because you can just see it in her face, even though she tries to hide. She's having an absolute blast. And that dialogue between her and Burnham on Book's ship before they arrive at Hunhao is just classic Georgiou. And just picking up on even the slightest little Freudian slip that Burnham says, Amy.
Yeah, that was, oh, you love him? I said live here. And it's really very fun to see them back and forth. And they both have some truth to what they're saying. So I think it's really fun. But it was really interesting when Georgiou had that flash. I noticed it was when they were talking about Tyler. And so I'm wondering if there's somehow a connection with the mirror, with Ash Tyler, with his transformation. Maybe she went through some kind of transformation. I don't know. It's very curious, and I'm definitely hooked into this part of the story.
Now, Hayley, I want to talk about what happens with Georgiou here in this flash, because this obviously ties into what happened in the previous episode. You think our little interrogator there has planted something subconsciously, or maybe a subconscious thought did something to unleash a subconscious thought into Georgiou's head?
It's either that, or I postulated that perhaps there's some kind of implant that, he put in her unknowingly, maybe, perhaps, to maybe control her a little bit, suppress those homicidal urges so that she doesn't kill the entire crew of Discovery. But it's causing some problems, clearly. But I really am intrigued by this because we don't know the rest of the conversation that they had. We don't know exactly what he said to her, but I also think this notion of that the divide between the mirror universe and the current universe has grown so much. A crossing has not happened in 5 years, and essentially they're separated. They are no longer connected enough that there would be any more crossings, has really kind of gotten to her. She can't cross back over. And I think maybe she kind of thought that perhaps going into the future, she could still kind of cross back over to her side and continue to live in the Terran universe, in the mirror universe. So I think there's also that at play, that she's realizing that's not going to happen, or, she's never going to see that side anymore.
Yeah.
Is kind of getting to her.
Yeah. I found that interesting. I'm curious to see how this is going to play out. But, yes, Hayley.
Wait, but there's more. Okay, black boxes. They still exist, people.
The black box is iconic and will never go away. But there's something real quick. Hayley, as a cat owner yourself, you know exactly what I'm going about. When the cat goes under the bed and won't come out. Because I have 2 kittens who love to do this.
Yes. Yes. It takes salmon treats.
Mm-hmm.
I've discovered salmon treats work, getting the cat out from under the bed. Luckily, most of our beds have stuff, so she cannot get under the bed. But she likes to hide behind the curtains.
Yeah. I love that just short scene with Mary Weissman and the cat. Mary Weissman might get, supporting actress to the cat award or something like that. But I thought that was fun, and how they used it, her realizing Grudge was there to realize, wait a minute, where's Burnham?
Although, could Grudge be a flirkin?
Oh.
Tilly says, "Did you eat Burnham?"
Yes. Is your real name Goose, not Grudge? Yeah, they got a little Marvel MCU reference there. So, other thing too, Osira. This is obviously somebody who's going to be playing a big part for a while this season. I'm finding it interesting, this whole kind of underworld thing they're exploring, because it reminds me of what we just kind of went through with Picard too. And I'm wondering, there's been some hints of some things connecting Picard to this season of Discovery. Now, of course, nothing officially been said, but I'm wondering, could this be one of those little things that is going to connect some things that are going on in Picard with Discovery, with this whole underworld that they're really starting to establish in the Star Trek universe right now? I'm kind of curious. What do you think, Amy, with this whole thing?
It sort of makes sense, and we've always known there's like you said, an underworld, and we've explored it in the 24th century, with the Tal Shiar and the Obsidian Order, and so we know other people have it, and then DS9 Section 31, now Starfleet has it, so it only makes sense that it's still going to exist. There's always going to be trading and bartering and borrowing and having credit, and then you got to pay that credit. So, and like Giorgio says, there's always bullies. This, Tolan is a bully, and I just bullied him more so that I could, get down onto the planet. So, it makes sense. And with that, like you said, that connection to Picard, there's this intrigue, and I think it's not the same story, but what do you call that? A trope?
Yeah.
I guess you would say of, an undercurrent, that's going over what is legitimate.
I think the thing I'm fascinated by, Hayley, is the fact the Star Trek universe has always been kind of represented as the clean universe. Everything is in good order. And really, especially with Discovery, and what we saw in Picard, and now all this now, obviously, the Federation and everything there, but still, we're seeing the dirty underbelly of Star Trek a lot more these days.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's always been there. It's just been not the major story. As Amy was saying, we have, the Orions, and we have the Cardassians, and we have all these secretive agencies that kind of do their own thing. And we look back to Deep Space Nine, where Faith in the Great River, and trading things, and trading this thing for this thing, and this ring for this thing. So it's kind of always been there. It's just never been the forefront, and now we're kind of getting more of it. And so it's really quite interesting, and I think that just plays into the story of what's going on. They have to show it, because unfortunately, this is what's happened. And when Starfleet and the Federation collapsed because of the burn, essentially, what else is going to take over but what's already established and what's been running ever since? And so that's why it's the predominant thing, because there really isn't much of a federation at this point.
Yeah.
So it's quite interesting. I do have something I want to ask you guys. So Giorgio, when they're trying to go on to the planet, she says we have, quote, real dilithium. And he goes, real dilithium. So I wonder, could it be that perhaps the dilithium that they have, because they're such small crystals and there's only so much to go around, it's not actually real in the sense of what we have seen dilithium be in Star Trek so far? What are your guys' thoughts on that? Because I really latched onto that, and I was like, wait, everything else isn't actual dilithium. It's manufactured, how in the world? Because granted, we've already heard from Star Trek that they make dilithium, but clearly the organic compound in it is no longer there.
It's a good point because I caught on to that too. And it makes me keep going back to what happened in Discovery Season 2 with the one character regenerating dilithium. And it just makes me wonder if it's somehow not connected to the burn, because maybe most of the dilithium being used wasn't real dilithium. And I'm kind of curious to see how that is going to play out there, because it's this little nugget that they dropped, and I'm very intrigued by that. Amy, I know you had to pick up on that as well.
No, I didn't, and I'm loving this. I mean, yeah, they've got dilithium and they need dilithium. I did not pick up on the word real. And so now I'm very interested. And you're right, those little small things that we saw in the other episode, yeah, they could be grown, manufactured like you're saying, but it's not the real substance as if you were to mine it. So very interesting.
Yeah. The other thing I'm intrigued by, and I want to ask you guys on this because we didn't touch on it, and I'm surprised you didn't mention it. The nacelles are gone, people. The nacelles are gone. They're programmable, but then they're still floating next to the ship. And what and why and what are your thoughts? Because I'm like, okay, I get it, but then on the other hand, I'm like, why? Now you just okay.
I watched the episode 3 times, and it wasn't until the 3rd time that I think I sort of understand. So with them being detached, they said it increases maneuverability. So I'm assuming that the engines, the nacelles, can move greater distances, and then it pulls the ship at a wider range. So you're going to be able to get more maneuverability instead of like you've got your nacelles and they're in the same plane. But if you have nacelles that can change and be moving 3-dimensional. So I'm just saying what they said. It increases maneuverability, but I'm still very curious. And I've asked, and they're like, well, maybe it's like magnets, And I'm like, oh, okay, I don't understand it. But if it increases maneuverability, then I'm all for it.
Hayley, science-y?
Well, my issue is, okay, you want to increase the maneuverability, but unless, as we see later in this episode with Book's ship, unless the ship is able to become a tanagram and all the pieces can go apart and then come back together somehow, you're not increasing the maneuverability by just removing the nacelles. This is a 23rd century ship in the future. It's still a hunk of a machine. I'm sure it's probably bigger than a lot of the other ships that they've got. So I don't understand. The only thing I can come up with is that somehow by saying the nacelles are really not there, given that Discovery has actual dilithium and has a lot of it, anytime they send them out, they don't want it to become such a major target. I mean, it kind of already is because it's got the spore drive, which is completely different and nothing like that either. But I wonder if it's just to kind of make it less of a target. So another ship would be like, oh, they don't have nacelles, so they wouldn't have a warp core. They wouldn't be able to have dilithium. So they're not as big of a threat. That's where I go, because this whole we can maneuver better. I'm sorry, this ship is still huge. The rest of it's still stuck together. It's not going to increase maneuverability, whatever.
And you have now been educated. The more you know, brought to you by Science Officer Hayley Stoddard. Let's move on to Act 2. On Discovery, Adira Tal works in engineering, and as her vision of Grey Tal protests that she only ever works, eats, and sleeps. Lieutenant Paul Stamets enters complaining that someone moved the intermix pods in a way that does not make ergonomic sense. He protests that engineering is in chaos. But Adira explains she redesigned the spore drive interface so Stamets would no longer need to use the shunts on his forearms. Instead, the drive can now be controlled via nanogel, which acts as a quantum transducer. Stamets is grateful. On Hanau, Giorgio praises the efficiency of the fencing system and asks to purchase it. But Tolar tells her it's a proprietary technology owned by Osira. Burnham quietly asks Giorgio to buy her some time. Giorgio distracts Tolar with additional questions while Burnham approaches Book, who takes her to a secluded storage area. They embrace. As he explains, he also has the implant and he still has a black box hidden in the wall of his quarters. However, Burnham says she will not leave without Book. He warns that Osira is ruthless, explaining that Rin was born into the Emerald Chain, but that after fomenting dissent, she cut off his antenna and forced him to install the explosive implants, making him a pariah among the workers. On Discovery, Tilly directs several crew members in engineering where she is ensuring the spore drive is fully operational in case the ship needs to jump. Saru pulls her aside and asks about Burnham's disappearance, but Tilly says she must have had a reason to leave them in the dark. Saru reveals she violated his direct orders by leaving, alarming Tilly. Saru confides that he has not felt as mistrustful of Burnham since they served on the USS Shenzhou. Tilly suggests Saru inform Vance of Burnham's disobedience, saying she does not want the entire crew to be thought less of if Vance does not learn of it from Saru. Tilly says she may also have acted as Burnham did in that situation, though Saru says he does not believe that. On Hunau, Burnham uses a piece of metal to bash the drone apart, almost immediately setting off alarms. Giorgio uses the drone's parts to build a weapon. Meanwhile, Rin has informed the other slaves of the plan, though he says he does not know how many believed him. Rin also retrieved the black box, a small cylindrical device from Book's quarters. Lots of interesting things here. I want to start, though, with everything that's going on with Adira Tal, because I'm liking how they're kind of bonding her with Stamets right now. And also the whole fact that she can see Gray Tal, still have full conversations with Gray Tal, and how much that's going to play up in that. And, you know, it's always good to replace Shunts with Palmolive. I'm just saying, guys. Hayley, what did you think of that?
Yeah, I thought that was a really beautiful scene in this episode where just a lot was going on. And it was nice to see them connect. I mean, they have a lot of shared similar experiences, and I think that connects them a lot and makes them bond really well. And I think also Stamets sees a lot of himself in Adira and sees this potential that they have at this point and where they could go from there. And kind of almost an admiration as well, just because Adira is 16 and is this brilliant engineer, scientist. And I think that's really quite fascinating. And I love that he just really embraces that Adira can see Gray. And I'm intrigued by this, of how this kind of works. I wonder if, you know, Gray is there to help Adira process the experience of becoming a host. And, you know, the trauma of losing Gray so violently and so quickly that maybe after a time, Gray might become more of an internal dialogue rather than Adira seeing Gray. But I don't know. But it's really beautiful.
Yeah, it's nice to see Stamets showing a little humanity, Amy.
It is. And I do... see if I can put this positively. I do like Adira totally giving Stamets, get off my lawn. You know, old man sitting on the porch, you know, who moved this? I think that interplay, and we sort of talked about that last time with, you know, Jet Reno saying that they're dysfunctional, but, you know, it works. And so I like that. The Adira and Gray story, I really liked it, but this week it fell flat just for me. I think because I'm more interested now in Giorgio. I'm not sure why it's all happening, and I don't know where it's going, so I'm not invested. And I noticed Gray said, you know, why haven't you told anyone? And this has never happened. Do you know why this is happening? I think they had that conversation either last week or this week. And I'm just like, so Gray knows this is different. And Adira doesn't really know anything, but I'm wondering if Adira thinks a thought, does Gray hear it? Or must she speak using her words? So I'm a little interested to know what's going behind, but I think the best part is, you're right, is that Adira and Stamets are connecting, and this is going to open Stamets up emotionally. And I think that's good.
Yeah, I think it is too. But on the other side, we're back to more of what's going on this trade planet and the underhandedness going on. Obviously, we have this fence that is quite deadly. I love how Giorgio probably was legitimately wanted that technology for herself. We really start seeing just how deep Burnham and Book's connection is here too, and you realize there's a lot more going on than what you think, even though it's been kind of hinted at before, but still, and just how evil it looks like the Emerald Chain actually is. And I'm curious, and something I want to ask both of you, your thoughts on this. Obviously, we're still dealing with the mystery of the burn, but they're setting it up for the Emerald Chain to be a pretty big bad for what's remainder of the season. We don't have that much time left. Is the burn going to be something that carries over into another season because they're going to start putting the focus on the Emerald Chain, or is there going to be some kind of cliffhanger tie-in because of? I'm just curious because they're setting up a lot of stuff for a short period of time here, Hayley.
Well, and they kind of did this in season 2, but then they wrapped it up like rather quickly. So I think the Emerald Chain could very well be something that's going to carry over into season 4, perhaps, just because this thing's not going to go away. They have been controlling who knows how long. Maybe we can say within a few years after the burn. So over 100 years, let's just say the Emerald Chain has been operating probably at the forefront of everything. So I think that storyline will carry over, but I think the burn storyline will end with season 3. I think Burnham's going to figure it out because she's clearly hyper obsessed with it and cannot let go. And even though everyone else is like, yeah, it happened 120 years ago. We have theories as to why, but we don't really know. But we have all these other problems that are bigger than trying to figure out this thing that happened 120 years ago when none of us were alive to witness it anyway in the first place. And she's almost kind of annoyingly hyper-focused on it and wants to figure it out and wants to find out why it happened. And I almost wonder, too, if part of it is if she thinks that somewhere in there she's going to figure out what happened to her mom. And that's why it's kind of just a little obnoxious that she's that concerned with it, considering everybody else kind of isn't.
What?
But I think that will get wrapped up.
Yeah, I think you have an interesting point with her mom. I'm curious to see how that's going to play out. What are your thoughts, Amy?
Well, it's interesting because the Emerald Chain is the Andorian Orion Syndicate, right? Yeah. And weren't those two, a long, long time ago, founding members of the Federation? So
no.
They weren't?
I don't know.
Andorians,
so.
Yes.
The Andorians, I think, were, but not the Orions. Not the Orions.
Oh, okay. Well,
they were space pirates.
Then so. my point halfway stands. If we want to get the Federation back and start bringing it together, we're going to have to sort of deal with this Emerald Chain. I mean, with the Andorians, we want to bring them back and maybe even bring on the Orions if they can behave. So I feel like because the Emerald Chain has that Andorian connection that they once were in the Federation, I think it will be wrapped up. And I think that will be answered with the burn. So I feel that both of them will be answered. And Hayley, I wanted to go off what you said with Burnham being hyper obsessed about finding the burn. And actually with what you said last segment, when you were saying that's what a Badmiral does. Like Burnham is now breaking pretty big time rules. She chooses to follow the ones that are, okay. But the big ones, she's going out because she is so, as you said, hyper obsessed. And like you said, a Badmiral gets on this path and feels that their actions and their choice and their perspective is the most important. That is the only one. This is the one that must be focused on, which I think mirrors what we see in Picard, but that's another story. So I want to ask, Burnham's belief that the Federation can only be rebuilt if they find what happened at the burn. Like, why does she think that we just can't rebuild right now? Look, here we are at ground zero, and maybe we don't get all the people, all the planets back together, but why can't we rebuild right now? Everyone's in the same spot. It's a perfect time. And so I'm just like, why is she so focused? Why can't she get it into her head that maybe that's exactly what Vance is doing, is rebuilding?
Yeah.
Well, and he mentions in this episode that Starfleet was in talks with the Emerald Chain, and then those talks fell through. So, it is very interesting that, and I posited this and talked about it last night. Like, why? Why can't we, like you said, why can't we start from where we're at? And not everybody, when Federation was founded, not everybody had the same technology. Some places were more advanced than others, but they all came together anyway, and everybody's in that same boat. And granted, it's harder to communicate, but why don't you work on getting, some subspace relays back up, put things back into place that, will advance everything. And I think part of it too is just the fact that, she and Discovery have come from a time when the Federation was strong. And I think she's having, even though it hasn't come across, I think she's having a hard time letting go that everything that they did, the reason that they came forward in time to save everything, and everything's not exactly the same or better, it's worse, I think is part of that. I think maybe it's this dichotomy of, wait, we did all this and we had all this amazing technology, and granted, other technologies leapt forward in leaps and bounds, but Federation is not what it is. And I think she maybe is having a hard time letting that go. So maybe that's part of it too.
Yeah.
What do you think, Kyle?
I think Discovery is walking a very fine line to getting back into the Discovery problem, which is Burnham knows best. And I think they need to be careful. I think, though, they could play up on what you're seeing with Burnham a little bit. I think that could make for an interesting storyline, especially with this conflict she's having with herself of, I want to be Starfleet, but I like to say I had this taste of independence from Starfleet, and I really like that too. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how they play that out. And I think it's something when we look back, they've been kind of setting up with Burnham for a while now, since really the show started. So, I mean, she's always been like the gifted, promised one almost. And now it's like, wait a minute. She doesn't necessarily feel part of the Discovery crew. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. But let's move on. Hayley, would you care to read Act 3 for us?
Yes. At headquarters, Saru informs Vance and Willa of Burnham's unauthorized mission and assures him they remain ready to respond if needed to Argeth. Willa notes the USS Cuyahoga has returned, and Vance tells her to clear the ship before performing a Barian sweep. Wow, that's a fun term we haven't heard in a while. He also tells Saru that talks with the Emerald Chain have broken down and that Discovery may need to jump shortly. On Hunhow, Burnham and Giorgio have allowed themselves to be taken captive and brought by Talor aboard Book's ship. A henchman has found the 30 units of dilithium aboard. Just then, the shift change in the salvage facility prompts Book, Rin, and the other workers to riot and escape, though they are pinned down and cannot pass the fence until it is deactivated. Burnham and Giorgio fight Talor and his men, but just as Giorgio is about to use her constructed weapon against Talor, she is incapacitated by another flashback and falls to the floor. After Burnham struggles with Talor, Giorgio comes to and retrieves the fence controller before he beams away. She deactivates it, allowing the slaves to escape to a waiting transport vessel. However, Rin is injured by an energy beam, and Book remains behind to help. Burnham and Giorgio use Book's ship's weapons to fight off the guards and beam Book and the injured Rin aboard. Giorgio shoots down several of the floating vessels, heavily damaging the facility, before they and the transport vessel warp away to safety. Book gives Burnham the black box, which he had hidden away in his glove.
Yeah, so some interesting things going on here. Giorgio has yet another flashback, and I've noticed something, and maybe you guys can see if you agree with me or not. It seems like Giorgio is having these flashbacks when she gets something really emotional happens and Burnham is involved. Like, that's twice now, once in a conversation, just a general conversation, but it was still a little heightened because they were kind of going at each other a little bit. And then now here when they're in this fight and Burnham's in danger and Giorgio has this flashbacks, which makes things worse. So is it just me picking up on something that might or might not be there, or could there be a little something to this? Amy, you're kind of giving me the look.
Yeah, I'm thinking about with her standing in the corridor, Burnham wasn't around and she was sort of in that trance. I did pick up that when they were talking, and like I had mentioned before, like Burnham was talking about Tyler and that's where she went. And then again, if I were to just mathematically look at it, those 3 data points aren't going to be enough for me to make a leap like that. I think the point of it seen in this episode is that they're coming more frequently. Mm-hmm. That's what I would say. I don't feel that when they happen has anything to do with her emotional state or anything going around. I mean, she was very focused. They were fighting Tolar. Like, she was very focused, and then standing in the corridor, she wasn't focused on anything. So it seems very random. I think the point is that it's happening more frequently. And for more severe. Yeah, and more severe and for longer duration.
Mm-hmm.
So what is it she's remembering, Hayley? What do you think?
I think that there's a very good possibility that she's remembering the death or killing of Mirror Burnham.
I felt that too. So it's going to be interesting to see how that can play out. I think there's a lot of things going on there. A lot of this, though, was the basic, Prison Break kind of story tropes and stuff here. But I did like it when they did show up in Book's ships and just started blasting away. That just is fun because that's something you don't see a lot on Star Trek. But Amy, I see you with some. The wheels are turning, Miss Nelson.
I know. Every movie we see a ship firing, okay, there's always a gap. And if people are running, they're always running in the middle. And then the ship is, shooting and it's getting you beside you. And I'm not talking just Star Trek, Star Wars, any movie. If a ship is firing, it's firing beside you. And now all of a sudden, from the ship, we can pinpoint exactly where this person is running and hit them every single time. To me, it took me out of it for a moment, and I was like, okay, I know this is fake anyways. Okay, I will just go along with the ride and say, okay, this ship is going to destroy all of the Orions or whatever. It really took me out on how accurate it was. If they would have missed a little bit more, it would have been better for me. But it was good special effects and everything.
The reason why the ship has such a good weaponry is because Grudge programmed it.
Okay, all right, then I'll buy that.
you know how cats get with those little laser dots. They get pretty.
Yes. Okay, that headcanon right there.
No. But yeah, I mean, a lot of classic tropes here, but it was still fun. And one of the things I liked about this was I think we get a lot more insight into Book again throughout this episode, and that's something I'm really glad to see about because he's quickly becoming my favorite character on the show next to Grudge.
Yeah, well, so to your point, Amy, what I think of is yes, they're coming out straight, but I think they converge and cross at some point because they almost kind of come out like this. So it looks like they're coming out straight, but I think they're angled enough just enough that eventually one's going to go this way and one's going to go this way. So they're going to cross. Viewers, you can't see me crisscrossing. So that's kind of but I do get your point of like, okay, we're going to exactly pinpoint with the ship. Mm-hmm. And I kind of miss, TNG. It was just, it streamed, it came around and it shot, but it was one shot and they could exactly kind of direct it. So I almost wonder, just because of this programmable matter, if it is it's 2 shots at a time, but it's programmable and they can direct it where they want to go.
Okay.
Maybe. I don't know.
Makes some sense, but our intrepid heroes do escape, which leads us into Act 4. Miss Nelson, would you be so kind?
Absolutely. Burnham tells Georgiou they need to talk about what is happening to her. Burnham is alarmed to find Georgiou does not know, though she admits it has been happening for weeks and is becoming more severe. She tells Burnham not to tell anyone else, but Burnham responds that she is not in the Terran universe anymore, and vulnerability is not a death sentence. Georgiou says she remembers a time Michael Burnham asked for her trust, and we know how that ended. In Discovery's mess hall, Stamets sees Adira seemingly talking to herself and says he is curious. Adira tells him she can see gray. Stamets says she is holding on to someone she loves, as he did after Hugh Culber was murdered and before he was resurrected from the mycelial network. The experience changed his mind about life and death as a linear phenomenon, and that he believes Adira can see him. Adira tells Stamets she can do something about his shunt. In sickbay, Book tells Burnham that Dr. Tracy Pollard says Rin will recover and his neck device has been removed. He notes that it is time for Burnham to face the firing squad as the two enter the turbo lift. He says he hopes she doesn't regret having put her in this situation and stops the turbo lift. He thanks her for saving his life, and the two nearly kiss, but are interrupted by Linus accidentally beaming into the turbo lift, having meant to go to the science lab. Oh, that was so funny. He leaves, and Book passionately kisses Burnham. Can we just have the image in our mind? Okay. At headquarters, Vance chastises Burnham's rogue mission, but also tells Saru he may have approved the mission given the unique opportunity to gather intelligence. Vance tells Burnham that she does not get a pass for having saved the future, and that she would be in the brig, but that she saved lives on Hunhao. Burnham tells Vance that the Federation cannot heal until the cause of the burn is discovered. Vance leaves Burnham's punishment to Saru, who sorrowfully relieves her of duty as first officer, leaving her as chief science officer only. She tells him he is doing the right thing. He leaves, and a tearful Burnham removes her comm badge and holds it in her hand.
So much character building happens in this final arc, and it's all so wonderful. So let's just kind of go through it moment by moment. The Burnham-Georgiou exchange, so interesting because Burnham is literally calling Georgiou out on a weakness, and that's something that Georgiou was really probably not experienced in a very long time. And I love the line that vulnerability is not a death sentence, but Georgiou fires right back at her, Hayley.
Yeah, she definitely does. And it's interesting to still see this dynamic of it's interesting because Saru doesn't trust Burnham and neither does Georgiou. And those are kind of almost the two most important people to her at this point in Discovery. And so it really tells a lot about the choices that she's made in both universes that have led to this. And I can only imagine the struggle that she's going to have knowing that these two important people don't trust her judgments. They don't trust what she says. They don't trust that her actions are always going to be the right thing. And yeah, that's really kind of sad, actually.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I love the way they're playing Georgiou right now.
Yeah, and what I was thinking about with this first little scene here, Georgiou, like says, you know, you asked me to trust you before and look where that turned out. I think Burnham. So, okay. In my mind, I feel like Georgiou is acting the way she is because of the mirror universe, but she's doing it like for selfish reasons. So she's now here in this universe, but still seeing evidence of people, and especially Burnham, doing what she thinks is best, i.e. being selfish. And so I'm feeling like Georgiou is like, all of you are fake because when it comes down to it, Burnham. You're going to do what you want to do and what you think is right. And whether you tell yourself it's to save the world or save the universe, you're doing it for selfish reasons. That's exactly what I do. So don't be judging on me. And no, I'm not going to trust you because look at how it turned out. So I'm sort of feeling like there's something going on of, do you address the true intents and purposes of your actions? Are they selfish? Are you going down this hole where you know what's right and aren't going to see things? You're getting closer to that mirror universe that Giorgio is. So I'm seeing that connection there.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. And it comes back to what we've been talking about a lot with this episode is, what path is Burnham really on? Is she about to go bat him on us? Or, it's gonna be interesting to see. But the next thing was actually my favorite scene in this whole episode, and it's the scene in the mess hall with Stamets and Adira, and also the scene that happens slightly after that with Culber and Stamets in their quarters, where Stamets talks about how good it feels to have the shunts out, but this was just so powerful, and you could really feel the emotion. And Hayley, I could see you kind of giving me the sad, heart-wrenching face as I was talking about this.
Yeah, I think this really, in this last bit of the episode, really stood out. It was so beautiful. And I loved Adira saying, I could help you take those out. And I'm sure at some point Stamets was thinking about it potentially, in this last, couple episodes with talking with Tilly about other interfaces that they could use. And I can only imagine that he's tired of these things in his arms. And so I loved that Adira was like, I can help you take those out. Like, I know enough in not only my own experience because I'm from this time period, but also I have all this past experience from these other hosts. I can help you remove those. And then the subsequent scene with Hugh and their quarters and being, talking about this and why Stamets feels kind of such a connection to Adira was just really beautiful. The only thing that took me out of it was the stupid lighting in the windows, because it's going to bug me every time they show windows and there's light coming in. And I'm just like, that doesn't happen. And then if it's like lights like inside the windows, like, why would you want to do that? It's going to obstruct your view anytime you want to look out and actually see something out in space.
Very good.
It was really beautiful.
Yeah, I loved the Culber and Stamets. Like, to me,
so
that it was beautiful. And again, we're seeing Culber sort of take on this counseling role. Hey, Paul, why do you feel that you have this connection? And asking those questions that are getting Stamets to, understand. Well, this is going to be good. She trusts me. He sounded almost shocked. So I really enjoyed that scene. Just real small. I will nitpick one last time with Adira. They're sitting and I don't know how well the Stamets and Adira know each other, but even me in my friendly state, I wouldn't reach across a table, unzip someone's clothing, pull up and say, hey, I can help you with that. I would just normally say, hey, those shunts on your arms, I can probably do something about it. I wouldn't be going into their personal space, unzipping clothing. That took me out of it. Again, that might be messing with my why I don't like the Adira thing right now, but that just took me out of it.
I can see that a little bit, but to see Stamets lose those shunts, because I think that comes back to something I've been noticing. It's the rehumanizing of Stamets. And I think we're kind of a little bit on the Stamets redemption tour here. Somewhat, he's still got the ego, he's still got the arrogance, but he's kind of he's reconnected with his humanity after everything he went through in season 2, and I'm really liking that. And I think I'm kind of concerned though that this relationship that he's developing with Adira could lead to some really heartbreaking moments later on in this season or in a further season here, depending on how some certain things play out. But It's very interesting, and I'm really liking it. But let's talk about the next scene, because this was the kiss heard around the turbo lift. First of all, just real quick, I have to say thank you for not doing the typical trope of, every time we think they're about to kiss, they get interrupted, and then nothing comes from it. Having the interruption and then having Book just be Book is great. And you know what? I'm glad they're doing this, because I think it's really I have a feeling of where it's going to lead to, and I'll discuss that here shortly. But I just love the version of Burnham that comes out when she's around Book, Amy.
Absolutely. And you are right. You could see the interruption coming from a mile away. Like, your typical, I'm going to stop the elevator. But it was so amazing. I felt it. I love them together. I had something to say about that. Kiss. Oh, yes. Okay, I found it. Thank you. Okay, what I love about this is that we get the backstory of Burnham and Book being in together, working together, being friends. We have this history of a year. When Burnham and Tyler got together, I never was into that. There was no, like, he came on board and then they're together. There wasn't really any time. It wasn't anything really developed except for in the Sanest Man Go Mad episode. But even then, that had its own holes that you had, because then each loop, like, that didn't build a history. Here, Book and Burnham have a history, and that relationship seems so real that I'm absolutely in love with this relationship because of that. They're taking the time to develop it, and that's what we need.
Hayley?
Yeah, saw this kiss coming a mile away. It was very much like, all right, when are they going to put this in? Like, when is it going to happen? How many more episodes do we have to wait before this is going to happen? But that interruption from Linus, that was hilarious. That was like my favorite part of the episode. It was like the best thing ever. And to your point, Kyle, with how Burnham is with Book, it's that relaxed, I'm not a Starfleet officer, because she wasn't a Starfleet officer in the year that she spent getting to know him. And I think that's where she's realized she's comfortable with. And I think that coming back to Discovery was much more of a
culture shock?
What's the word? No, it wasn't a culture shock, but I think coming back, she felt obligated to. Because, they made this choice to follow her into the future. They didn't have to. They could have stayed where they were and lived out their lives as it was. And she still would have saved the future without them. But they made this choice. And so it's like she's obligated, and she feels that she has to go back and be aboard the Discovery and be with this crew because they made the choice to go with her. And so she's got to follow this through. But in reality, she doesn't want to. We saw that episode when she said, I don't want the captaincy. And she almost didn't want to be his first officer either. And so she's just very much doing it out of obligation and the guilt that she would feel. She said, I don't want to be a part of Starfleet anymore. I think that's where that's coming. And so that's why she is so comfortable and relaxed when she's around him and kind of lets that guard drop because she's not obligated to anything with him at all. They're friends and it's blossomed into romance. But other than that, she's not obligated to say, hey, I do have to go with you. Much more of this pull of I have to stay with Discovery. And I think she's going to regret it.
That brings me to the final segment here of this episode, and everything we talk about just made me appreciate it more because there's a few things I see here, and I want to bounce a couple of things off you guys. First of all, I think the fact that you see Burnham remove her comm badge and holding it in her hand is very significant because I think, at least for a while, she's leaving Discovery. I think she's going with Book, and we're going to have a couple storylines with her with Book looking for the answer for the burn while Discovery is doing other things. But I also think that's happening because I think Vance is pulling strings. I think Vance even hinted at it that this is exactly what he wants from Burnham. He wants Burnham out there investigating the burn because he can see how obsessed she is with it, and he needs somebody who's going to investigate it, because I think he knew by telling Saru he's going to allow Saru to handle it. He knew what Saru was going to do. I think he's kind of got a read on Saru, but still, that leads me to the other thing too, is that scene with her and Saru was just heartbreaking because, and this is just how far the Saru character has advanced and how amazing Doug Jones is. It was almost like just heartbreaking in the aspect of seeing how Sonequa played it. It was like, it was what she wanted to do, but it killed her to break Saru's trust and how much respect she has for Saru. And I think that's just something because of how the Saru character has evolved. She still puts her priorities ahead of Saru, but there's still this respect she has for Saru in a way that, you know, I'm going to do what I'm going to do, but it's killing me to do it. So I'm interested to see how that plays out. What do you guys think? Is there something there to this, especially the Vance thing? Because I think Vance kind of knew exactly what he was trying to do there, Amy.
That is really interesting. And as you were talking, I was like coiling. I'm like, no. But you might have convinced me. I am absolutely loving how they're writing Vance. As I said last week, he's fair. He's not making assumptions. He's not coming to harsh judgments. And especially here, like Vance not only is disappointed in Burnham, but points out to Saru and says, you know, if I was asked, I could have probably said yes, said, you know, the risks are worth it. Let's get this. I didn't have that opportunity, and that's bad on you, Saru, Captain Saru. And so but then as you were talking, Kyle, sort of making it possible to free up Burnham to go explore and figure out the burn. You may be onto something there. I'm not going to say that it's diabolical because I think Vance is very, like, perfect.
Book. Yeah.
Book. By the book and very logical. I'm loving Vance. I love that he's the head of the Federation and he's doing a great job. So it may be, you might have convinced me. And to your point with Saru, I just feel that when he was talking to Tilly, like how emotional and how vulnerable he was becoming to Tilly when he was like, well, to be honest with you, and then shares what he was feeling like in education, you don't talk about others. That's a big thing called FERPA. And you don't talk about your students to other students, or you don't even talk about your students to other teachers. Like that's a big no-no. And that he's, you know, trusting and opening up to Tilly. And I love how Tilly responds and is like, you know, she made a choice and it's forcing you to not have one because you need to go to Vance before he hears it from anyone else. And so I think there's that connection. I'm wondering if he's going to choose Tilly as his first officer. I don't know, but I have noticed with episode 2 and now this episode, Saru is definitely depending on Tilly. So I'm wondering. And then also my other question, if she's demoted to chief science officer, does that put her still above Stamets? Or he's in engineering, right?
Engineering, yeah.
Yeah, he's engineering.
Oh, okay. All right, then never mind. So, yeah, who do you think Saru is going to choose as first officer?
Well, you bring up an interesting point, Amy, because you talk about that moment he had with Tilly. That felt very captain-like from Tilly. That felt that what she says was like, it was one of those Tilly moments. It's like, you see the potential in Tilly in that moment. And I think that's something that they've been kind of playing up on. Remember, she was trying to get into captain's training earlier in one of the earlier seasons of Discovery. So it's those little moments. And I just wanted to bring that up because that was something I did notice. Is like you had this moment with Tilly where you're like seeing Tilly take a step into her potential. But just so much happens here, Hayley. What was your take on all of this?
So, okay. I don't think that Vance is really kind of pulling strings. I think that he was much genuine in saying, well, if I had known about this, I might have authorized this. And it's a maybe, he might have said no. And in that case, Burnham still would have gone off and done it anyway. But, it's worth always asking. So I don't think necessarily he's a badmiral. I think he's just very much tired of trying to put out all these little fires and sometimes big fires, and that's exhausting. And he wants, things to improve and be better. I see that potential in him. And so, he's kind of got this hope with Discovery and this spore drive that potentially, we can start communicating with the other planets that are still in the Federation, and we can get things kind of back on track to where, the Federation is not being overrun by the Emerald Chain. I don't think that Burnham respects Saru. If she had respect for him, she wouldn't have asserted in the last week's episode of, we've got to get those, those planets that they've been to. We just have to do it. We should just do it. We should subvert the Admiral and just do it anyway. She wouldn't have gone to him with that, and she would have done it on her own, and that still would have shown that she doesn't respect him. The fact that he told her, no, we're not going to do this, and you're not going to go save Book, you can't do this, and she does it anyway. She doesn't respect him enough. She doesn't respect the chair, and that's part of it too. She doesn't respect the captain's chair. We've seen that in season 2. We saw it in season 1. And so that authority just doesn't matter to her, unfortunately. And so the fact that, Saru demotes her is not a surprise. She saw that coming. She knew it was going to come. I think her taking off her badge is kind of that inner struggle of like, do I really want to stay obligated to Discovery, to this crew who followed me, who loved me and followed me into the future? Or do I want to forge my own path? I don't think she's going to leave Discovery just yet. I think despite the fact that Book in this future time has a lot of tech, I think there's still a lot aboard Discovery. Perhaps the sphere data is going to come into play a lot more in this season, as well as figuring out what happened with the burn, perhaps. And so I think she's still going to stay aboard, but she's very much going to continue to just do her own thing. And she's not going to go to Saru about it. She's not going to say, hey, can I go do this? She's just going to go and do it, because now she's not, number one, she's not tethered to having to completely follow orders, even though she still should, as an officer should. She doesn't necessarily see that as an obligation, but I think she still feels obligated to the crew and the ship, which, by the way, is gray now, not brown, which was kind of sad and interesting. And then as far as Saru goes, I don't think he's going to pick Tilly. I think, if anything, Tilly will get a promotion. She's still an ensign. I think she's maybe the only ensign aboard at this point. Maybe besides Adira. I don't know. Do we know Adira's? Do we know what she is?
I don't think they've said.
No.
Okay. Anyway, so we'll say Adira is just, I don't know. Anyway, so Tilly's the only one that's an ensign. I think she's going to get a promotion. I think, there's a lieutenant in there, perhaps. I don't think that she's going to jump from ensign to first officer. That's a really big leap as far as rank goes. I posit it could be Nilsson, because at this point she's third in line, or second in line, actually, because, if Saru's had her take the con a few times already. I know we don't know enough about her. There's not a lot of backstory to her, but I think that that's how they could give her some backstory. I think she seems the most probable because of where she's on the bridge.
I think it should be Linus, and we should just all be thankful for it. So yeah, a lot to absorb in this episode, but I want to hit a little piece of trivia here too, guys, because this is something I've noticed with this season of Discovery. A lot of tributes to DS9. And in this, while salvaging, Giorgio states she wants some self-sealing stem bolts, which was something invented by the writers of Deep Space Nine to give Nog something to trade with. They've since been referenced on other shows, but never explained or shown. I love the fact that they've been paying a lot of tribute to DS9, especially after what we left behind. And there's this like resurgence of DS9 love that's been happening in the Star Trek community, guys. Amy, what did you catch that? And you look like I can see the mile-wide smile you got going on this one.
I did catch it, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's Deep Space Nine." And then the Barian sweep, gotta love that from Starship Mine. So again, it's so fun to listen, and it usually happens on like my third rewatch where it's like, oh, now I know what they're saying, or that's why it's always good to have the closed caption on. But I love hearing these little Easter eggs that they drop in.
My favorite was the jar of badges.
Yeah.
Oh. That they like zoomed in on.
Yeah.
That was really neat. Mm-hmm.
That was.
Yeah.
Well,
and we had a Bajoran.
Yes, we see Bajorans for the first.
Oh. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting world. The world Discovery is building right now. So before we take a quick break, do you have Amy? I see you have one last thing you want to get in there.
I do, just real quick, because I asked, like, who did we thought Saru was going to choose, Kyle? You didn't say, you jokingly said Linus, but I came up with an idea, and I want to see what you think. What if Vance tells Saru that Willa needs to?
I think that's a very distinct possibility.
That was my other option.
Because I think Vance wants somebody from his time on the ship. And they seem to be giving her some more things, and that would be a great way to integrate her into the ship.
Yeah.
Well, and I think she'd bring a lot of knowledge about the current timeline and everything that's been going on. So I think that would be really neat. Now, they just need to reverse educate her on what a CME is.
Yes.
I think they need to send her through a few more black alerts, too, just so.
She just needs to listen.
So, well, on that note, I actually really like that idea. I think that's the way they need to go. I'll be curious to see what they do. But on that note, we're going to take a quick break, tell you what else is going on around the Fandom Podcast Network. Then we might see what some communications arrays have picked up for us. We'll be right back.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. We like to continue to feed your ears by inviting you to listen to the Fandom Podcast Network and all of the other awesome shows we have to offer. It starts with our flagship show, Culture Clash, our weekly pop culture news podcast. Blood Kings, our Highlander podcast. Couch Potato Theater, our podcast celebrating our favorite movies. Time Warp, the Fandom Flashback podcast discussing a year in movies and our favorite pop culture topics. End Zone, the NFL podcast. Good Evening, an Alfred Hitchcock podcast. Union Federation, our Star Trek and Orville podcast. Hair Metal, the 80s and early 90s rock metal podcast. Type 40, our Doctor Who podcast. Lethal Mullet, a 1980s and 90s action film podcast. What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast. And our newest show, Making Treks, a new Star Trek podcast with a deep dive into the final frontier with host Mark Newbold and Adam P. O'Brien. You can enjoy all of these great Fandom Podcast Network shows on our master feed at fpnet.podbean.com. Fandom Podcast Network is also on Apple Podcast, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. You can also find us on Facebook under Fandom Podcast Network. You can also email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. You can also find us on Instagram and Twitter under Fandom Podcast Network. Thank you for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
And we're back. I hope you guys are enjoying everything out there that we've been doing with the Fandom Podcast Network. We're growing. We really enjoy doing what we do and hopefully giving you guys a chance to smile and have a distraction from all the craziness that's in the world today. But you know what? We have quite the communications array here on the Union Federation Starship. So let's see what we can pick up in some subspace signals. Not a lot, but you know what? It's always fun when you find those like lost signals that somebody may have accidentally sent out. And in this case, I certain member of the Picard cast might have put something out that we kind of knew, but we didn't. And that's Evan of Agora, who has confirmed that Picard Season 2 production start time will be in January. And to quote him, yeah, January we will be filming. I don't know if they have posted the date. All I know is everyone's saying January, January, January. So we'll start Season 2 there, and in my opinion, it cannot come quicker. I'm so excited not to just get back to work, but to get back to the Motley Crew and hang out with everyone in California. But this is the one that caught my eye. He also was quoted as saying, I'd like to see Geordi. I'd love a sparring session with Worf. It was Klingons who were viewed as enemies, and we get given Worf, and that is a different perspective on Klingons. Not everyone is the same, and I think it is the same with Elnor. It's a different view with Romulans that we haven't seen before. He's so different than most Romulans are. Most Romulans are very secretive and not trusting and scheming, and you've got this Romulan kid, this sister boy, and he's completely different. He speaks his mind in protecting and helping people. Picard, I was just talking about this with Amy a couple days ago. When is Picard starting? Production begins in January, it looks like, guys. One other person that Evan did say in the interview he really would love to see come on the show is Sir Ian McKellen, because he's like, we've got to get that friendship on the show. I'm excited for Picard Season 2. I'm glad to hear it's starting production. I actually wish it would have already been in production, but obviously with COVID and everything. I'm probably more excited about Picard right now than I am just about anything else coming for Star Trek, because I love that crew. I love that cast. So Amy, I'm really excited for this. I'm hoping we get a lot of updates in the ready room soon.
Yeah, I thought that, I think it was 2 weeks ago, or I read an article that was saying that that Picard was starting in December. And I was like, well, that doesn't make sense, because then we have the holidays. So this makes a little more sense than hearing January. I am very excited, and nice to know that Elnor we will get to see again, it seems like. And we do get that different perspective, and that makes it so it's not this all monoculture, right? That we see so much in TNG. And yes, with Worf, it got us a different perspective, and Elnor is going to bring this different perspective about the Romulans. So I think that's a great call, and I am very excited too. I finished reading the Picard book, The Last Best Hope. And so there's some backstory with Elnor in there. And so that really makes me excited.
Haley, it's Picard. I mean, come on. Who doesn't love
it? Is. And it's really exciting. Again, I'm not a big, like, woohoo, let's bring all the cast back from TNG kind of person. But I do have to say, if I could have my two, it would be Guinan and it would be Geordi.
Well, we know that both of those, for sure, Guinan is happening, and there are a lot of rumors that LeVar Burton will make some kind of guest appearance in Season 2.
Right. Did you read the book?
No.
Oh, well.
Wait. Okay. Spoiler warning for the new Picard book. Amy, you got tune out for about 30 seconds to a minute. Amy, hit us.
I'm just saying that in the book, Geordi plays an important role. So it would only make sense, since they are co-canoning the books now that they're written at the same time, that it would absolutely make sense to see Geordi in.
Okay. I'm down with that, because, Geordi is my favorite TNG character.
He is.
So real quick, guys, I mean, we didn't have a lot of Subspace Signals, so it gives me a question. We're coming up Thanksgiving, just a couple days away. What is the most important dish on each of your Starfleet tables? So, Haley, I'm going to start with you on that.
It's my turkey. I make really good turkey. I'm not going to lie. Listeners, if you want to know, I dry brine my turkey the day before, and then I make an herb butter, which I put underneath the skin, in between the meat and the skin, and then I put it all on the outside. Yeah. I also make homemade cranberry sauce.
Yeah, there is no food replicator at the Haley household. Amy, what about you? What is the must-have on your Starfleet Thanksgiving table?
The wine. No, but I am having this Carmenere that I discovered in Santiago, Chile last year. I was down there for Thanksgiving last year, so I didn't have a Thanksgiving dinner. And so in remembrance of my last year when I could travel and stuff, so I'm going to be serving Carmenere wine with my turkey dinner. But yes, I also will be making the turkey And I'm very excited. And then one thing, I know it's probably gross to a lot of people, but I'm doing stovetop stuffing. That's what I grew up with. My mother, single mom, raising me like you did, stovetop stuffing 5 minutes before you sit down. And it was just wonderful. So that's my little homage to my mother.
Oh, that's awesome. No, the stuffing is very important. I need good stuffing, whether it's and I'm good with the stovetop, but I gotta have the stuffing. I'm also a big fan. Give me some good mashed potatoes and gravy. You know, get that turkey gravy going. Put that on there. And I need my pumpkin pie. I need that. But I do have one Thanksgiving tradition that I've actually hooked our co-crew member Kevin Reitzel on as well. Every Thanksgiving morning, before I get my day started, I go into the holodeck and program up WKRP in Cincinnati. Turkeys away.
Oh. Not as a fun episode.
We were perusing, and I think it was Hulu. So if you have Hulu, they actually have holiday specifics, and they've pulled episodes that are specifically holiday ones, like from like Golden Girls, and like it's just like a breakdown, and they've gone through and just found like the Thanksgiving and the Christmas episodes and compiled them all together. And then they have the movies too. But I was like, oh man, the poor person who had to go through and like read all the IMDb descriptions and find the holiday specific episodes to do this. Kudos to them, because I can't imagine the work it was, but I thought that was really awesome. So you can watch just the holiday episodes of any show.
Thank you.
All over.
Thank you. That's like the most, if you don't listen to anything else, this is what I'm taking away.
Well, another thing on Hulu too, I've been exploring some of the things on there. If you need your favorite Picard roguish captain fix, the seasons of the Musketeers from BBC are on Hulu, and you will get your fix for that. It is a wonderful show. Peter Capaldi plays the Cardinal Richelieu in this. He's not Tim Curry, but he's pretty darn good in it as well. So check that out if you need something to kind of binge watch over your holiday too. So with that though, happy Thanksgiving to my wonderful crew. We will be back next week to talk about the next episode of Star Trek Discovery. Guys, I can smell your turkeys from here.
Oh, it's good.
Yes, and Unification 3.
Yes.
Next week.
Crazy.
I know.
Oh, real quick too, if you need your Will Wheaton fix, besides the Ready Room, Ready Player 2, the audiobook came out today. And he is he is reading it once again like he read Ready Player 1. I've already listened to a couple chapters because I'm all in when it comes to Ready Player 1. So,
awesome,
guys. With that, we're going to close some hailing frequencies and get out of here. Happy Thanksgiving to all of our listeners. We love you guys. Hope it's a safe one. And until next week, hailing frequencies are now closed.